Everybody knows that knowledge is power, and yet few people take the time or effort to properly gather or fully use the information that they consume every day. They listen to videos or read books, only to completely forget everything that they just learned within a few hours. In this video, I will go over a system to better gather, organize, and use the information that you consume on a daily basis. That system is called building a second brain. Now, the first question that we will go over today is, what is a second brain and why is it useful? Essentially, a second brain is like your very own digital library where you can store and easily retrieve all of the best, most interesting nuggets of information and all of your best ideas that you have in your day-to-day life. It's useful because it lets you preserve information and easily access it at any point. Before I adopted this system, it felt like learning was pouring information into a bucket, except the bucket had holes in the bottom. It felt like it was completely useless. Any information that I consumed would very quickly be lost in a matter of hours or days. It felt like nothing I could do was making an actual meaningful impact in my life as a whole. However, building a second brain is like putting a larger bucket beneath the original bucket that is your mind. It captures all of the information and makes it easy to go back and refer to it. A second brain is also useful because it gathers all of the most important information and puts it into one centralized location. This makes it a lot easier to recognize patterns or connections between ideas that would ordinarily be almost impossible to spot, as the time between when you consume each piece of information is normally hours or even days apart. This centralization of information is also useful because it makes it easy to form a base of your own personally created or curated information. This gives you a foundation on which to more easily express your unique perspective or views. It is essentially a force multiplier for all of the creative work or information work that you do, as it gives you a massive pool of knowledge to draw from. Now, you may ask, how is it that you create this second brain system? Well, creating a second brain can be broken down into 4 steps, which can be easily remembered through the acronym CODE, which stands for Capture, Organize, Distill, and Express. This system comes from Tiago Forte's book, Building a Second Brain, and I would highly recommend that you check it out after watching this video, as it goes into a lot more depth into the topic of knowledge management and building a second brain. All right, now let's jump into the nuts and bolts of this system, starting with C for Capture. The essence of the capture step is essentially just getting the most important piece of information that you consume or come up with in your daily life out of your head and into your second brain. And while there are many ways to do this, one of the best and most versatile, in my opinion, are Notes apps. Notes apps can come in many varieties. In fact, there are probably thousands that you can download at this point, but I am only familiar with a few of them. The first and the most basic of these options are just the default Notes app that come installed with pretty much any phone or computer these days. These are a great point to enter, and while they aren't great for having large folder systems or hosting your entire second brain, they're normally too lightweight and not really designed for that much of information. They are great for quickly jotting down ideas, which can then later be transferred from that basic Notes app into a more heavyweight system designed for all of that information. One of those more powerful Notes apps is Obsidian, which is the app that I personally use. It is highly customizable, as it has a library of thousands of community-made plugins that let it be turned into pretty much anything you can imagine. And it's also local and hosted on your own device. The note files that it makes are in a markdown format, which means that you can access them even if you were to no longer use Obsidian. And finally, it is very organic in its structure. It uses links between notes, almost like a Wikipedia article, as its main form of structure, allowing it to grow organically, almost like neural connections in a brain. It does, of course, also have a normal file system and tag system as well. Finally, the last of these 3 notes apps is Notion. Notion is opposite to Obsidian in many respects. For one, it is cloud-hosted, which on the one hand means that you can easily sync it between devices and it allows for easy collaboration. But it also means that you can't access your notes or files unless you have an internet access. It is also very structured and architectural in its file system and general design, which is different than Obsidian's more organic and flowy design. The other element to consider is what is worth capturing. What should be kept in the second brain versus what should just be left out. Now, the things you should aim to capture in your second brain are knowledge assets, things that are useful or applicable in your actual life. These things are difficult to find if you try and analyze your way through to search for them. It is very difficult to think your way through what pieces of information in a book are going to be useful a day from now versus what will never be used again. Instead, it is much more helpful to rely on intuition or your left brain. Instead of thinking about what is worth keeping, just trust your gut. And if something seems to resonate immediately on an instinctual level, then keep it. Now, these recorded knowledge assets can take many forms. They could, of course, just be normal text notes that you take on your phone or on your laptop. They could also be pictures that you take or voice memos. They could also be clippings that you take from the web. They can be pretty much anything, unless they are one of 3 things. If they have a very large file size, then they're typically not great to keep in your second brain, as most notes apps are simply not designed to keep large files in their file system. It's also not great to keep sensitive documents or passwords in your second brain, as most second brains are not designed to maximize security, unlike password managers. And finally, it is best to keep files that require a dedicated app outside of your second brain, as they won't be of much use in there. It is not very helpful to keep a Photoshop file in a second brain when you could just keep it where it's immediately useful, in Photoshop. Capturing also has many benefits. Taking the time to quickly jot down a little note recording a key knowledge asset can not only preserve that information for later, but it can also help with memory and comprehension using something called detachment gain. Essentially, when you speak something out loud or write it down, it engages different parts of the brain and solidifies information more than if you had just kept it abstract in your mind. Now, this improves memory, and it also can improve your understanding and lead to a cascade of new insights as you can begin to iterate on that piece of information because it is now in physical space instead of just an abstract concept in your mind. The next step in the code method is organize. And while there are countless ways that you could go about organizing your second brain, the one that I use and the one that is described in the book Building a Second Brain is the PARA system. Now, PARA stands for Projects, Areas, Resources, and Archives, which are the 4 root-level folders in the organizational system. Project folders are for short-term goals that have a defined endpoint. Some examples could be writing a book or losing 20 pounds, anything that has a set goal and a set endpoint. The next root-level folder is Areas, and that is where you can keep folders for organizing parts of your life that have a set goal and need management, but don't have a set end date. For example, health or finance. The third section is the Resources folder, and this is where you can put more typical subjects such as math, biology, or piano. Anything that you have interest in, but isn't important enough to be considered a core area of your life. You could put folders for hobbies, folders for just areas of interest or subjects at school. You can have a resource folder for anything at all that you're interested in or that you think might be useful sometime in the future. The last root folder is the archives folder, and this is where you can put all of the files that are no longer immediately useful, such as completed projects, areas of your life that are no longer useful, or resources that no longer interest you. The archive folder serves essentially to take anything that's not immediately useful and put it in a place where it won't clutter up the rest of the file system, but can still be easily searched for and used when or if it becomes relevant again. The para system has many benefits over a more typical organizational structure. For one, it's based around actionability and not completeness. The point of a second brain isn't to perfectly categorize and put each little piece of information in its own perfectly labeled box. It is instead to enable and empower you with the information that you put in it. Matching this, the para system makes using the information in your second brain as effortless and simple as possible. Additionally, since it's project-based, the para system makes it easier to find relevant pieces of information to whatever project or area you happen to be working on. It means that you don't have to go hunting around to find each individual little labeled box, but can instead keep everything in one single project file. It doesn't matter how seemingly unrelated the information in that project file is, as long as it's useful to the project at hand, then it can all be kept in one single place, cutting down on time searching through different files. The final benefit of the para system is that it's dynamic, changing as your life changes. While ordinary file systems can slowly become bloated as year after year you slowly start and drop new hobbies or areas of interest, the para system has one single archive where you can put all of your past projects or areas of interest that no longer interest you anymore, but that you might want to eventually come back to. Moving on, the next step of the code system is distill. Distill essentially means to capture the essence of a note in as few words as possible. And there are a few ways to do this. The first is progressive highlighting, where essentially you take your note and you highlight the sentences that best capture the essence of what it is the note is trying to convey, while maintaining as low a percentage of the original note as you can. Attempt to distill down the word count of the note as low as you can, and then do it again. Take your highlighted text and go over it a second time, this time highlighting single words or phrases that best summarize the entire note. This can be quite difficult, and it forces you to think out of the box as to how to distill down what originally was likely several paragraphs of text into just a few phrases. The other way to distill information is through mind mapping. Mind mapping is very similar to progressive highlighting in that you want to get the word count as low as possible, but I think it's a little bit more sophisticated, as instead of just forcing you to think in a linear structure, line after line, it lets you work in 2D space and thus capture relationships and hierarchies of importance. The obvious benefit of these two methods of distillation is that it makes information very easy to quickly refresh on or understand. Instead of having to read through paragraphs of text, you can just glance at a few double highlighted phrases or a simple image or mind map. Another less obvious benefit is that it improves your memory. Tell me, which is easier to remember? Multiple paragraphs of text or a few simple key phrases? Mind maps are even better for this, as they structure information in a way that the brain more easily comprehends. Our brains are designed to remember and understand images far better than abstract concepts or text. Thus, when you create a mind map, your brain is essentially hardwired to remember the information in it, much more so than if you were to just write it down. Now, the final step in the code system, and what all of the other 3 steps have been building towards, is Express. The core concept of Express is to use your already captured, organized, and distilled notes to create something, either for your own benefit or to give back to others. It helps avoid having to start from nothing, from a blank page, and to have to try and force your brain to come up with entirely new ideas or find entirely new information all from scratch. It makes much more sense to have the ideating and information gathering process be perpetually ongoing throughout time, and that way, when you sit down to start a new project, you can start with a whole bunch of building blocks already there, ready to be assembled into a new creation. However, just because you are using these building blocks, which are notes of your own creation, doesn't mean that you don't have to cite the sources that those notes originally came from. I find it helpful to write down the author or the source in the front matter of each note that I take. That way, I don't forget to credit them when I eventually turn those notes into a project of my own. Now, using this system to take advantage of your already made notes has quite a few benefits. For one, it allows you to take advantage of all the information that most resonated with you in the past, instead of being forced to rely on just whatever information you can scrounge up at the time of starting the project. It also lets you take advantage of all your best ideas in the past, avoiding having to come up with ideas in the moment. There's also the fact that by creating this way, not only do you create meaningful value for both yourself and for others, but you also begin to build true expertise and knowledge in a way that just learning from a book or listening to a video can't hope to match. Only by applying information can you truly begin to understand it completely. On that note, I would like to encourage you to actually apply the information that was covered in this video. Don't just click off and let the information that you just learned slowly leak from your mind. Instead, let this video be the first note in your second brain. Open your Notes app of choice, or even download one of the ones listed in this video, and then go through each of the concepts listed in this video, one by one, and apply them to your Notes vault. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.